All right, welcome to HackerCon. How's everyone doing tonight? Is everyone still awake? This talk is about red teaming your bug out bag. How many people, real fast, have even heard of a bug out bag? You know what it is? Okay, all right. So a pretty good number of people. So this talk was submitted based on last year. The presentations were half prepper, half hacker. And this was one that came to my mind as soon as I started seeing some of the presentations given that I think needs a little bit more insight brought into it. So if you read the synopsis, part of prepping is having an alternative plan. Things don't always go as they're supposed to, right? We always have issues, we always have hiccups. There are things that get in the way and prevent us from being able to act based on our plan. So it's always good to have a secondary plan. So that's what having a bug out bag is. If stuff fails, having the needed resources at your hand to be able to survive in a bad situation is basically what you're getting into. A little bit about me. My name's Tom Moore. I'm a Christian, husband of one, father of three, and I'm a uber geek. I'm a red teamer for an organization, perform pen tests regularly, so I love breaking stuff. Second Amendment supporter. This is my Russian bride, Helga, my AK. I love her. But I enjoy outdoor recreation. I'm concealed on Twitter. I'll follow back if you shoot me an invite, shoot me a follow. Quick disclaimer: this talk contains zero IT content. So if you're here for IT content, this is not the talk for you. And I'm more than fine if you decide to head out. This talk is focused on hacking survival. What are the things that we need to know? What are the things that we need to have on hand in the event that we have to suffer through a situation for survival? Secondarily, I'm in no way an expert in this subject. I'm just someone that wants to make sure that I'm prepared, if not for me, for my family. And the views expressed during this presentation are not any part of my employer's. They are mine solely. We'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to clarify terms. The reason I use the word bug out bag is because it's the one that's most known, right? Bug out bag is a term that's used publicly. But there's also what's considered a get home bag, okay? It's not as widely known. If I would have said red teaming your get home bag, most people wouldn't have understood what I was saying. A bug out bag would be primarily consistent of tools that you would be able to utilize to set up a new set of is where you would exist, right? You're going to have tools to be able to create shelter, to be able to work on the things that you need to use to survive. Bug out bag is going to be much larger than a get home bag. What we're actually going to talk about today is what's considered a 72-hour bag or a get home bag. But so that's the difference. A get home bag should consist of giving you the items that you need to be able to survive for at least 72 hours. Whereas a bug out bag, you should be able to survive for at least 2 weeks. Okay, bug out bag is going to be considerably larger. So, principles of survival. We're going to cover a couple basics, some things that we need to know to be able to get into the rest of the presentation. So we have the rules of three. Has anyone heard of the rules of three? Awesome. We had at least one hand. All right, so you can survive for 3 minutes without air. You may have brain damage, but you can survive for 3 minutes without air. You can survive for 3 hours in extreme environments without adequate shelter. Okay, whether it's really hot, really cold, really wet, extremely dry and humid, you can survive for 3 hours in extreme environments without adequate shelter. You can survive for 3 days without water. So water is a big concern that we need to have when we're in a survival situation. And you can survive for 3 weeks without food. Most of us can't survive 3 hours without food on a regular basis. Ansie's patting his belly. But we need to make sure that we keep these rules in mind, because they're going to be very detrimental to how we plan for a secondary evacuation, or how we plan what we put into our bug-out bag. So we also have the 5 C's, okay? These are the primary items that we need to make sure that we have replicated in our kit. First is cutting. We need to make sure that we have a cutting device of some sort. It's very, very useful. We need to have cover. And we saw that in one of the rules of 3. We need to have a container of some sort. We need to have combustion, something to be able to start fire with. And we need to have cordage. Those are the 5 most important things that we need to plan to have in our kit. So first, we'll start with cutting. Cutting consists of anything from a pocket knife to an axe. It could be a saw. It could be a saw wire. There are many things we can use for cutting devices, and it's one of the most useful things that we will have on our person if we are in a situation that requires us to be able to survive. One of the most difficult to produce with raw materials. I mean, you can use rocks to bludgeon things. You can try to sharpen rocks. You can try to create something that's going to be sharp. You can use rocks to sharpen sticks and things of that sort, but those sticks are not going to be hardened tools like what we have available to us today. So having those is going to be extremely beneficial for us. Your situation and location will dictate how many you're going to need. If you're in an urban environment, you probably don't need as many cutting tools as what you may need if you're in a rural environment. If you're going to be out and truly having to survive in the wilderness, you're going to need more of these. You can get by with one, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. They vary in efficiency depending on the task at hand. If all I have is a blade, like this one, and I have to cut down a tree, it's going to be a little hard to do, right? I'm either going to be hatcheting at that thing, or I'm going to be using it as a baton with another stick to be able to use to cut a tree down. It's going to be a lot harder than if I had a saw or an axe, right? But a saw or an axe is going to be not very efficient at doing something like cleaning out a wound, right? There are big disparities in those. So we need to know what their strengths and weaknesses are so we know how to plan for our bag. We need cover. Cover requirements will be determined by your environment. Again, if you're in a cold situation, you're going to need heavy, thick wool, something that's going to be insulative. You're going to need something that's going to be governed by your location. And what you have in the situation in which you find yourself in, where you need a bug-out bag, what you have on may not be sufficient for what you need to be able to survive. So having clothing, how many of you work in dress shoes? Are those going to be comfortable to walk in on a long trip? So just a quick scenario before we keep going. Say you're at work and you have a 30-minute commute. How long would it take you to walk that back home in the event that some mass catastrophe took place. We'll say not even an EMP, but say fuel just gets cut off. There's a huge fuel shortage. You forgot to fill up before you went into work. You get out. There's mass chaos going on at all the fuel stations. You can't get somewhere you need to be able to get the fuel you need to get home. I have family. I don't want my family being subjected to being in danger due to someone trying to come and siphon fuel out of our vehicles. I've got to have a backup plan to be able to get back home. How long would it take you to walk on a 30-minute commute? Anyone guess? Walk for a 30-minute drive? It can take a day or two, depending on the terrain, depending on what you have that you've got to go through. You could also have situations where you're not only having to make that trek, but you're having to make it as secluded as possible. You may not be able to stay along the main transit lines if you're trying to stay away from other people that may be violent in nature to survive, right? So your situation you may not have everything you need. And shelter cover should be a priority in an overnight outdoor excursion. There are some situations in warm environments, things of that sort, where shelter may not be a big deal, right? But most of the time, it's going to be a very uncomfortable night. You'll survive, but it would be much better to have some sort of a rain shelter or a dew shelter over top of yourself if you're having to sleep outside overnight. How many of us like to go camping without a tent or an RV? Right? I mean, if you're roughing the evening with nothing but the clothes on your back, it's going to be an uncomfortable evening. So we need to try to make sure the things listed here we have those available to us. A container. Your bug out bag is your main container, right? You put stuff in it. It's a lot easier to carry things in a bag than it would be if I were to walk up to this desk or this table and just grab everything in my arms and start walking. That's not going to be a very pleasant situation, right? So our bag is our first container. It's extremely hard to reproduce a container out of raw materials that you can boil water in. Why do we boil water? If we were getting water from a natural resource, why would we boil it? Right, sanitize it. It kills all the impurities in the water. So that is something that we also saw that we can survive for 3 days without water, right? So if we do not have a bottle of Dasani on us, how are we going to be able to sanitize that water that we find in a stream to be able to use that for to survive? Now, if you can get home in less than 3 days, or if you can get to where you're going in less than 3 days, water may not be a huge need, but most of the time it is. And you're going to perform better if your body has the nutrients and the hydration that it needs to be able to perform. So it's extremely hard to produce that. Can anyone think of a way out of raw materials to be able to create a container that you can boil water in? Bamboo. You can actually boil water in bamboo. You can take and cut a section off of this, cut the top off, put your water in the top, vent the bottom, and you can put it over top of hot coals. The water will hit this internal, usually thin gasket that cuts this thing off here, and we'll begin to heat the water to a point where it actually will boil. So that's something that may be good to know. If you run by some rogue bamboo, you can be able to create something to boil water with. Outside of that, it's very, very hard. Okay. Combustion. We're gonna have different situations. Again, if you're in an urban environment, fire may not be as big of a deal unless it's cold. yeah. So I mean, we're going to have different considerations based on where we are. But I like fire to keep me warm. It's helpful for keeping us warm, cooking food, providing light, purifying water. And one other thing that I didn't mention on here, if you were to get wounded during your situation, it may be helpful for you to be able to cauterize a wound using the heat from a fire and a blade to be able to survive, to stop bleeding. Cordage is the last thing. Cordage is a very time-intensive thing to reproduce out of raw materials. If we can take a little bundle of paracord that's 100 feet and reproduce something of its length in things that we find in the wild, it's going to take us weeks. Okay? It's not easy to be able to make something, especially something that's as strong as paracord. So having something as simple as that on you. Everyone's seen the survival bracelets, right? I mean, everyone's seen them. You probably have one. You may have it on a keychain. A lot of people are hyping them up, but the truth is that with just this string that's on my wrist and a blade in my pocket, I can create a shelter or something to be able to support a shelter and a fire bow, and I can survive with fire and shelter with just this and a blade, right? So there are amazing resources in cordage that we need. It can be useful for different items. Whoa, I just kicked it back. So here we go. All right, so we want it for building shelter. You can use it for tourniquets. If you get a bad wound and you need to cut off blood flow to the situation or to the location, I need to stop messing with this. You can create a tourniquet. You can set snares for trapping animals, food. Fishing. Paracord has 5 internal lines. You can use those for creating fishing wire with. Starting a fire. You can create a bow with paracord that you can use to start fire. Has anyone ever started a fire with a bow? One person. Not easy. We've got some other options that are much easier, so we'll go for those first. But if we have to, we can learn. Constructing cooking structures. You can create a 3-way tripod and tie it off at the top and be able to hang your meat over top of a fire to be able to cook it if you don't have anything else to be able to cook your kill or your prey in. So we can create cooking structures with it. So always remember, and this is going to be group participation, so hopefully you're awake. Everyone needs to repeat this, okay? 2 is 1, right? Say it. 2 is 1, right? And 1 is none. So 2 is 1, 1 is none. Something you need to remember. If you're in a situation where you have one pocket knife on you, what happens if it breaks? Right? You have 1. So 1 goes to none, right? If we have 2, 1 breaks, we still have a backup. We still have a plan. I'm not good at math, but that makes sense to me, okay? We have to plan for a situation where things aren't ideal. So considerations. What things do we want to consider about the items that we're going to put into our 72-hour bag or our get-home bag? So we want to think about size, right? Size matters. No way you can state that, really, other than that. But size does matter. We have to make sure that the things that we choose fit into our bag. Weight. If it's heavy and there's something that's lighter that does the same job, why do I want to carry the heavier one? Unless it's for durability. Cost. We're trying to put these bags together as something to have in a rainy day, but cost still matters to most of us. Durability. if I can drop it and it shatters and breaks, it's not something I want to depend on for survival, right? We want to make sure that the durability of the items that we select are that of a good quality. Shelf life. When it comes to food, things spoil. Things go bad. We have expiration dates. We don't want to be eating something that expired 3 years ago in a survival situation. If we have to. If we get sick, it's going to take a couple hours at least for us to get sick, but shelf life matters on the things that we're putting into our bag. And multiple uses. So if we have items that can produce multiple, tasks for survival, those are the things that are going to be most useful for us to put into this bag. So those are the primary considerations that we're going to look at. So let's look at practical implementation. If we're going to build this, how are we going to do it? First, we have bag selection, okay? And these are a couple things that we need to keep in mind when we're using a bag. It needs to be functional. If you have a backpack that you start using for a bug-out bag or 72-hour bag, and it is an utter pain to get anything out of it, it's not going to be useful to you in a situation where you have to get to something quickly, right? It needs to be functional. Many pockets is a good thing. It needs to be something that you aren't going to miss. If I go out and spend $200 on a 511 bag, I'm not going to want to put all the stuff that I may store away for years on end to have in there. But I'm on limited funds. You may not be in the same situation I am, so something you're not going to miss. It's set aside for a purpose, okay? Don't rate it. If you set this thing up, you do need to test it. You need to make sure, just like a disaster recovery, right? We need to make sure that our disaster recovery implementation will actually get us through a disaster. We need to test the things that we put together. But we don't need to rate it. Oh, I've got a set of gloves in my bag. I'll just go get those. Well, what happens if you're in a situation where you need that? You no longer have them set aside. So it needs to be low profile. I am not going to have a Rainbow Brite backpack that's bright pink, okay, that I'm going to use for a bug-out bag. It's not what I'm going to use. What is it? It brings out my eyes? Nice. You would be able to find it. I'm not going to use something extremely bright. If it's blaze orange, there's no way I'm going to be able to hide with a bright bag. In the same token, we kind of talked about 511 bags. I'm not going to have a multi-cam bag or a digital camo bag that's labeled a bug-out bag that I'm going to use. Can anyone give me a reason as to why not? You would be targeted, right? People are going to, if you're in a situation where you are seen by other individuals, if you're walking around with a regular JanSport bag, you're not going to stand out. If you have a big military pack on that's packed full of stuff, and someone sees that, they're going to look at you and think, they probably know how to survive, I'm going to leech onto them, right? I'm going to either leech onto them or I'm going to take what they have so that I can survive. Yeah, Casey has a very good example right there. It's an awesome bag. Love 511. Would not use that for a bug-out bag. I carry a Sandpiper California. It's all mollied out. Awesome bag. Wouldn't use it as a bug-out bag because I don't want to be targeted in a situation where I'm trying to keep a low profile and just get out to survive. The size of the bag shouldn't be set by what you intend to carry, okay? Don't get a huge bag because you think, well, all of this stuff can fit into it. What you need to do is find a bag that's comfortable, that is functional, that's easy to get in and out of, that you can separate items with, that's a normal size and not going to look extremely obvious that you've got a huge amount of cargo in that bag. And then you make your selections based on what can fit into that bag. Okay? Many of us would pack 80 pounds in a bag if we knew that we could carry it. But on a 72-hour excursion or survival, that's not really necessary. Okay? So we make the selections based on the bag that we chose because of its functionality and size. So we'll get into the contents. Based on the rules of three, what should be our first selection for our bag? What? Nope. It is very hard to survive without air. For any length of time at all, okay? We don't think about this a lot because it's not something that we deal with a lot. How many of you have been caught in a sandstorm? Few hands. How many of you been in a situation where there are chemicals in the air? Okay? If you can't breathe, you're not making it very far at all. So while this seems ridiculous for us in most cases, this should be the first thing that we put in our bag. 2 of them with a respirator on it, Lowe's, $7. Okay? Very, very valuable, something we need to make sure we have in a survival situation. So, secure your breathing mask respirator. And you can get more advanced. If you've got more room in your bag, by all means, get something that's going to be much more reusable. After a few hours, these are not going to work as well as they did when you first put it on, if you're in a bad situation. So the next 2 items in the rules of 3 are shelter and water, which most of you mentioned. We're going to cover those as we're going through down through the 5 C's. So the next item is cutting. Most of us probably have some sort of a small knife on us, right? How many of you have a knife? Right? We have knives. We keep them handy. They're very useful for us. It's good to have something that you can use with one hand. If something happens to one of your arms, it's going to be really hard if your knife that you're carrying on a regular basis requires that you use both hands to be able to open it. Okay? So single-handed operation is good. But most of us probably carry those. That's my normal one, CRKT Delegate. I love that little knife, little dress knife. But it's a very fast assisted opening knife. It's small. And that's primarily what I have on me at all times. Having a good quality multi-tool is also good. How many of you carry a multi-tool most of the time? It takes a special type of geek to carry a multi-tool all the time, right? I love carrying multi-tool. I've got my Leatherman Wave. I'll not pull it up because I've got it in here, but we have some desired features that we want out of multi-tool. You can get a cheaper multi-tool, but make sure it's not going to break. I can't remember what the movie was where the guy got caught in the rock climbing, had to cut his arm off. Yeah, 127 hours, right? So he really wishes he would have bought a better multi-tool, right? But we want a couple things out of our multi-tool. We want a set of precise pliers. We can use those for multiple things. We want a saw. So if that's the only thing we've got on us, if that's the only saw we have, at least we have a saw. We want a can opener. They can be used for multiple things besides opening cans. But if we find a food stash, we want a way to be able to get into that without cutting our finger off. And we need a blade. What was the statement again? 2 is 1, 1 is none. If you've got a regular blade and a blade in your multi-tool, at least you have a backup. Okay? A larger blade or camping hatchet. So I've got several different examples. But this is the hatchet that I have up here on the table. It's very lightweight, small. It's made by Coghlan's. Has a little case that covers the blade and a belt clip that you can put on the flat of your back. It's not very extrusive. It's small, it's lightweight, but it's a good thing to have on you. The next is a saw. If all I have is my Leatherman, that's going to be good. But this is much easier to cut down a tree with. And someone told me that I should cut down a tree out here on the sidewalk just to show how well it works, but I'm going to decline from that offer. And then I've got another knife here that my buddy turned me on to. It is one of the best knives that I've seen. It is full tang. Does anyone know what full tang means? Okay, a couple people. Full tang means that the blade that comes out of this extends all the way through the grip. Okay? If I'm using this in a situation, if this is the only thing that I have, and I need to cut through a tree or a sapling or some sort of firewood, I'm going to use what's called batoning, where I put the blade on the log that I'm needing to cut, and then I'm going to take another log or another stick, and I'm going to beat the handle of it or the other end of it in order to be able to get it forced through that piece of wood. Okay? If you're not operating on a full tang knife, you're going to break it right here. 2 is 1, 1 is none, right? So you're going to break one of your primary survival tools if you're not careful with how you work with it. So those are some of the primary cutting tools that I keep in my bag, and I can provide part numbers and things of that sort if it's needed. So cover is something that if I'm going to be spending the night somewhere in bad situation, I'm going to want cover. Has anyone ever spent the night outside without cover? What happens? Wet, cold. Even if it's not raining, you're wet. Dew sets, right? You're going to be wet unless you're in an extremely dry environment, in which case you're probably not going to need cover for other situations. So the first thing we want is shelter covering. A tarp or a USGI poncho. So I carry a USGI poncho for the primary reason that it is both, right? It does have a hood that comes out in the middle, but if you look at the ends, there are eyelet holes all the way down through it. It is a tarp and can be secured just like a tarp would. So having a tarp and a poncho is not very useful for me, right? I'm going to keep my poncho. It's usually lighter weight, still provides the same water shedding functionality that I need out of a tarp. If you do a tarp, if you don't have access to a poncho, get a 6x8 tarp. You don't need a huge tarp. You need something enough to cover your person, okay? You'll probably need a sleep system, depending on where you are. A lot of times, one of the other reasons when we've slept outside overnight without shelter that we get extremely cold and wet is because our body has nothing to insulate us from the ground. The ground is usually colder than body temperature, right? We're going to lose all of our body heat into the ground. So sometimes having a compact fleece sleeping bag is handy. And they can be very small. My buddy's got one that's about half this size. But just a small compact fleece blanket will help. Otherwise, what the material that I would suggest if you're just taking a blanket would be wool. Wool is a very good insulative cloth, and it can protect your body from losing all of its heat into the ground. So the other option, if you are stuck, if you don't have anything else, you can use two 50-gallon, 2 millimeter, thick trash bags. Okay? Take 2 of the bags, take the first one, and stuff it full of dry leaves. Fill it up. The reason you want leaves is because leaves primarily do not compact as easily as other plant life, like grass or something like that. Leaves are going to keep air. Air is a very good insulator. So if you pack one of the trash bags completely full of leaves, then you put your other bag inside of it. You can sleep inside that bag. You have insulation from losing your body heat through the ground. And in addition to that, you also have something that's going to shed water off of you when dew hits or if it rains. May not be ideal, but if you can carry a couple trash bags, they're pretty small. If you can keep a couple trash bags on you, that can be your sleeping arrangement, as long as you've got dry leaves available as well, right? You may want an outer jacket. You may want something else. For me, my poncho is also my outer jacket. Remember what we also said? Outer, multi-use is something that we can utilize. Okay, so Bill asks what my view is of the space blankets, right? They're referred to as space blankets. They are very cool, right? I recommend that you try to go outside and spend an evening with one. You won't want to do it again, okay? They do a very good job. They're very, very cool in their functionality, but by themselves, they are not sufficient. They're usually not very durable. They are a very good signaling device, so you could use it as a signaling device if there's aircraft overhead or something like that. But, yeah, I wouldn't want to spend my evening with one. I'd rather spend it with those trash bags and survive that way than I would with a space blanket. There's no way to reduce your heat going through the ground with those if you have it over top of you. Okay. One good thing about those is if you do have one in there, and they're very small, it wouldn't hurt to throw one in your bag. If you set up like a 5-minute shelter, if you set up a slanted tarp, if you're having trouble with maintaining body temperature, you can put that on the inside of your tarp, and it will radiate the body's heat off of you back into you. Okay? So there are multiple uses for them. I wouldn't base my survival off of that. Tennis shoes or boots. We talked about the situation probably not being ideal when we're in a situation where we need to survive, right? So tennis shoes. If I'm going to make a long trek, I'd much rather do it in that than a pair of, Johnson & Murphy's. So have some tennis shoes there. They don't necessarily have to be in your bag. Have them beside of it. Have them in your trunk. Rain gear. Again, multi-use. My poncho. So we've got that covered. Again, you can also use a trash liner for that. You can cut a hole in it, put it over your head. You can use a trash liner for your poncho. Container. And I'm going to have to hurry because we're starting to get out of time. Huh? No. Casey's after me. So, all right, so container. We've got our bug out bag, right? That's going to help me not have to grab all this stuff up in my arms. Use a regular looking bag, okay? It can be subdued in color. Just keep in mind that you may be profiled if you're in a situation where people are able to resort to, killing someone to be able to survive, okay? You want to be as inconspicuous as possible. You've got your canteen. Again, we talked about how hard it is to create a container that you can boil water in the wild, or out of raw materials. This is the canteen I carry. It's an old USGI aluminum canteen. I can put that right in a fire if I need to and boil water. The other good thing about that is that it also has a bowl that goes along with it. That will lock. But I can hold this after I've heated food in it and not burn myself and have something to eat out of as well. I would much rather boil something in this than I would in the canteen directly. You have the propensity to damage your threading or the cap. So I would much rather boil water in the cup than I would this. But this gives me 2 containers in one package. And it's a very good alternative. It's old school, but it has multiple functionalities. You could have a bottle. So here's another option that you can look at. This is a collapsible bottle. Very small, very compact, easy to pack in. But if I need to, I can take that and after I've purified my water, pour it in here, and then I can purify more water. Okay? So it's a good storage device. Also, and I don't know if I really get into it a whole lot, but the reason I chose this one is that I have a water filter that will directly connect to this to be able to just filter water if I don't have the way to be able to make fire. If things are wet, I can't get something started, I can just filter directly. I don't think I have it over here. It's down here somewhere. You can take a look at it in a little bit, but it's an inline filter. So a bowl, again, multi-use. Pot or pan, again, multi-use. Trash bags are also a container. What would you use trash bags for? You could use it for rain deflection, but more in terms of being a container. After you've purified water, you can actually use that trash bag to hold on to your water with. Okay, so if you're on a trek and you've only passed one stream and you don't know if there are other streams down the line that you're going to be able to get water to purify it out of, it may be beneficial for you to stay there for a little bit, purify more water, put it in a trash bag, carry it along with you. Okay? So again, trash bags, and they have multiple uses. Combustion. Ferrocerium rod. Does anyone know what this is? Okay? Yeah. So there are purification pills. Actually, something you may not know, you can boil water in this container. How many of you believe that? You can. You actually can. Okay? So what will burn this bottle is direct flame with direct access to air. Okay? So if this is very full, say this bottle, we'll keep this one off here because I'm drinking it, but say this bottle is fairly full. I'm going to take this wrapper off of this. I'm going to take the fire that I've got, and I'm going to pull some of the hot embers out. I can do that with my canteen bowl. I can do it with a knife. I'm going to pull some of the hot embers out and away, and I'm going to, after this label is removed, I'm going to set it up in an area, in a way where this air is at the top and in no direct contact with the hot coals. The water takes the heat that's generated from the coals and pulls it away from the plastic to prevent it from burning the plastic. Okay? So it will start pulling all the heat towards the top. And you can boil water in this. It'll take about 6 minutes. How many of you know how long you need to boil water to be able to remove the impurities? 2 minutes. Okay? So with this bottle, that's all I have. I can boil water on it, or boil water in it in about 8 minutes and have suitable water for drinking, for survival. Okay? Good question. The tablets and things of that sort, they get very complicated. They are good to have, good to be able to use. You need to study them and know how they work first. If you put too much in, it's going to be detrimental to you. If you don't put enough in, it's not going to get rid of the impurities. I'd much rather know that if I boil water for two minutes, it's good to go, right? So ferrocerium rod. How many of you know what a ferrocerium rod is or what it does? Okay, one person. So I cleared this with Rob. Hopefully we don't set anything on fire. But I want you to see this is an extremely, if I were to fall out of a canoe and I only have one thing on me, I would want this. My knife and my ferrocerium rod. Okay? Because with this I could create everything else that I need. But ferrocerium rod is a very easy to use fire starter. The knife that you select needs to have a flat spine at the top. Okay? If it doesn't have a flat spine, this won't work. But you can take, and the knife is sharp, so you want to maintain it, you want to hold it still, but you can take your ferrocerium rod and against that flat part of it, pull it, and you get sparks every time. You can create fire in a very short period of time on a very easy basis with this little rod and the back of a knife. That's important for multiple things, but this is also water resistant, right? If you drop it in the water, it's not like a Bic lighter. You're going to be able to strike it again. It's not like a match. You're going to be able to strike it again, and it will always, without fail, create sparks that can enable you to be able to start a fire in the wild. Matches. I've got some here. You can use matches. They make waterproof matches. Sometimes they get soggy and break, though. They don't work all the time. But matches would also be good. It's always good to have multiple ways to be able to do the same thing, right? 2 is 1, 1 is none. So a lighter. This would be in a situation where if I have this is going to be my primary way to start a fire. The only reason I'm going to use a lighter is if everything else is failing or I need to start a fire very, very quickly. Flint and steel is another way to be able to start fire. I don't even get into the bow and that way to start fire. These are things we want to keep with us. Tinder is something that you can create in a little Altoids can by cooking. But the way I do it is I have a little tin from ThinkGeek, and I use dryer lint. So I take the dryer lint, I put it in here, I cook it. It condenses to a very small, but very easy to start fire starter. So you can create tinder very easily. Just put it on a couple coals in a fire. Just let it cook. It can't pull in oxygen, so it doesn't just burn up the lint. It just condenses it and compacts it and makes it much easier to be able to use something to start fire with. Cordage. I want 550 cord. No matter where I go, I'm going to have 550 cord with me. That is very strong, very small, very lightweight. I think I get into some of that. Has 5 inner strands. You can fish with it. You can create netting with it. You can lengthen the string that you need. You can create smaller strands for snares and traps and things of that sort. You can create structure with it. It's inexpensive. It doesn't cost much. You can pick it up at Walmart. You pick it up at a hardware store, or you can order it off of Amazon. It's not hard to get. Another type of cordage that I would generally have on me, I don't have it here, is jute twine. It's a very fibrous twine. It's something that you can take and tear apart and make into basically a bird's nest that is very flammable, very easy to start, and right there you've got your tinder to be able to start a fire that will last. There are many other types of cordage that you can use. You can use zip ties, electrical tape, duct tape. You can make cordage out of these things. They're good to have. So what about rations? We're going to want to have protein-rich foods. We're going to have something that we can help. It's going to help our body pull in protein. So beef jerky is a good one. Protein bars. I love Clif bars. That would be another good thing to have on us. Carb-dense foods. We want something for recovery, right? So they make recovery bars. These things usually have pretty decent expiration dates on them. You do want to turn them over, though, right? Okay, you want to check those. Granola bars, another good source of carbs. So you can utilize those. You can also use military MREs. Okay, MREs are great, but they are large. They are sizable. You put a couple of those in your bag, pretty much done. An alternative to MREs, and I don't have one here, that I would suggest would be a lifeboat ration. So this is DX1000, 1,000 calories. They're very dense, wafer-like, coconut-flavored rations that you can utilize in a survival situation that will support your life. Additional items to consider. Some of the things that you may want in your bag: gloves, extra socks. If you ever walked in wet socks for a while, you realize you're going to get blisters. Bad deal. Blister kit, next one on the list. Medical kit. If you get cut, something like that, you need to have a way to be able to take care of yourself. Flashlight, extra batteries, glow sticks. I would recommend a headlamp as your flashlight. Reason being is if you're traipsing through the dark with a flashlight in one hand, your bag, trying to maintain it, and trying to find out where you're walking, it's much easier if that's just attached to your head and you've got something on you that you're going to be able to work with. It also has the red light, low light situation, so if you're trying to keep yourself from being seen, you have the functionality of being able to do that on most of them. You're going to want eating utensils, spoons, fork, titanium spork. You're going to want something to be able to eat with. Again, it's not necessary. You can get by without it, but it's much easier. Signaling items, whistle, mirror, a space blanket. There are multiple things that you can use for signaling. Your flashlight you can use. You want something for signaling. If you know how to use a compass, it's good to have one. If a situation, say an EMP were to occur, that iPhone app that you've got is not going to function anymore, I would not recommend betting my life on going the right direction with something like that. It's good to have an old school compass. Hygiene items, toilet paper, hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer, what else can it be used for? Disinfectant. It's got what in it? Alcohol, right? Not the kind of alcohol that you generally consume at these kind of conferences, but it does have alcohol in it, which is flammable, which you can start fire with. So hand sanitizer is good. Small towels or rags, what could those be used for? You can use them for multiple things. If you don't have gloves, it'd be good to pull something out of the fire with, right? You can use it like a pot holder. Another thing that you could use it for is filtering water. If you're in a bad situation, being able to filter water, I mean, Bear Grylls pulls his pants off, but we could have a little towel if we're planning ahead, right? FRS radios. If you're in a situation where you have to rely on these things, you should have a plan, if you have a family, of how communications would proceed in the event that you had to get back to them. Every evening, every 2 hours, turn it on for 5 minutes and see if anyone's talking. Shut it back off, save battery. FRS are the little radios. I keep my set in a plastic bag, but they're little short-range radios. They can have up to, it's just a special band of radio signal, radio frequency that allows you to have closed channel communication, and they can reach up to 14 miles. So, yeah, on a clear day with no hills in Kansas, yeah. An amateur radio license is awesome. The thing is that with amateur radios, you're going to be on a rubber ducky. You're going to be on a smaller radio if you're in this type of situation, because generally you're not going to have, you're not going to have a vehicle. You're not going to have the structure of having a large antenna. So while you can bounce off of towers, very good for that. And the Amateur Radio Club does a lot to make sure that they test out their disaster recovery situations, and they help with a lot of natural disaster areas. So yes, I highly recommend HAM equipment as part of that. So real fast, I'm also going to have a firearm on me. All right, I'm not going to be traveling without a firearm. The only place you're going to see me without one is here. And I'm going to carry a .22 in this situation. The main purpose being weight of ammunition. Okay, I could carry Helga, my AK, but I'm going to have 25 rounds of ammunition for the same weight, 2.2 pounds, that this 375 box of .22 caliber weighs. There will be, but we are on a last resort, right? I would love to carry a rifle around with me. Right. And that little pistol, that's the .22-45 Mark III, is a very, very accurate pistol. I love that little thing. And the CCI mini mags shoot wonderfully through it. I've never had one this speed. Make sure, if you do plan for a .22 caliber weapon, make sure to test your ammunition ahead of time. Okay? I'm just going to put it that way. There is some ammunition out there that is utter junk and will not cycle an automatic firearm. How many rounds would I recommend for a 72-hour bag? As many as you can fit and still not exceed the weight that you're wanting to carry. 72 hours could turn into 2 weeks, right? Right. That brick is small and closed. I know if it's closed, I'm not gonna have to worry about it. You can get the smaller CCI bricks that are 50 rounds. That would work, right? But I'm gonna stick with something like that. Keep it inside of a Ziploc bag so it doesn't get wet, corrode, things of that sort. So, not a fan. That's why I'm not carrying now. Otherwise, I would be. But that's my kit. That's what I'm carrying. I have a small, very small, lightweight holster that I'm going to carry. It's by Ace. You can get it on cheaper than dirt. I think $10. Okay, very cheap, very small, very lightweight, and it's tuckable. So you can put this on. You can tuck your shirt down inside of it. You're completely concealed. You have nothing but this little portion of the clip and what's above it showing on your belt line. If someone comes up to you to attack you, they're not going to realize that that you have a weapon on you until it's too late for them. If I've got a rifle slung over my back, I'm going to be a target, right? It's something that's going to call out to me. I would love to take my Remington 597 with me too, because I could hit things at much longer range, and it's a lightweight rifle. But that's what's in my kit. So parting thoughts. Tools without the technical ability to utilize them is worthless. Okay? You can do all of this prepping, you can have all of your gear together. If you don't know how to start fire with a ferrocerium rod, if you don't know how to boil water, you're going to have problems. If you don't know how to take care of building a shelter, you're going to have issues. It's good to practice these things. Just like a disaster recovery, we need to from time to time go camping on the rough side of things and make sure that our kit works and that the things that we're going to base our survival off of have been tested and true. Otherwise, I wouldn't base my possible life on them. Credit where credit is due. A lot of the things that I talked about, the 3 C's, or the rules of 3, the 5 C's, are by Dave Canterbury, Pathfinder. He has Pathfinder School. Awesome, awesome program. All kinds of YouTube videos out there that will explain to you how to set up a shelter in 5 minutes or less with 8 foot of or I guess 10 to 12 feet of paracord and 3 sticks or stakes that you can get wherever you go, and a tarp. If you don't have a tarp, you can lay sticks down it, create your shelter. You can do it with paracord. You need a knife, but with this shelter you don't.
He shows you how to do the knotting, the things that are harder to do. How many of you know how many of you spent time in the Boy Scouts? Okay, so a few. There are knotting techniques that are very, very handy to understand. How many of you know what a trucker's rig or trucker's hitch is? Right? Being able to cinch down line very tightly to secure something is extremely handy to know. So, my buddy Dave Cabell, he just had a little baby girl. The day I was traveling down here, he is my partner in crime when it comes to knowing what products are good, what tactics to use in situations. He's awesome, and he actually let me borrow his medical kit and some of the other stuff up here to be able to have to show you guys, because he has much more planning in his kit than I had in mine. But credit where credit is due. Last thing is there are additional resources. If you want resources to be able to look at, and I will put these slides up there. These are some great resources that you can look at. In addition to that, YouTube channels. There are many YouTube channels out there. If you are looking, just to put this out there, if you're looking to buy a knife, I highly recommend Nut and Fancy. Okay, awesome YouTube channel, does hundreds and hundreds of reviews of different firearms, knives, things of that sort. He'll tell you if it's junk or not. He has a standard, pick list that he goes down through and on his reviews of everything he does. And again, there's plenty here that you guys can reference. I know we don't really have time for them, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those off to the side. And here's my contact information. Thank you all very much.